Hello everyone and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia Lost can be found. This video is going to contain my review of the latest summon showcase. It's another Gala Dragalia remix, this time around bringing back the return of Gala Alex as our featured Gala unit. We also have a featured Gala Dragon, who in this case is Gala Cat Sith, and for the first time ever on one of these remixes, we actually have limited time adventurers and dragons making an appearance. So this time around, we have two brand new limited time adventurers in the form of Halloween Melsa and Halloween Akasha, and they're not featured, but they're present. We also have all of the past Halloween adventurers and Halloween dragons from prior years' Halloween limited banners available on this showcase as well. And one thing that's pretty cool is if you wanted to try Spark or Worm Sigil from them, the 5 stars from past years are available as Worm Sigil options, even though they are not on a rate up when it comes to summoning. So yeah, this is probably the most interesting Gala remix we've ever had. We've never had one quite like this with limited time units that are both new and old. Not to mention, it's one of the best Gala adventurers in Alex, and also a strong Gala dragon with no other featured or rate-up dragon really competing for it there. So yeah, both the dragon and adventurer slots look quite interesting on this. I think it's a very compelling showcase, and if you're just looking for that high-level advice of the question of whether or not you should summon, remember, this showcase, you have 3 days to summon on. You're going to get a free tenfold every day. It's use it or lose it, log in or forget about it. So make sure you're logging in, get at least your 3 free tenfold summons or your 30 summons total, and see what you get off of that. That's my plan for this, but I will tell you, I will probably go deeper. I really like collecting the limited adventurers. Personally, it worked out perfectly because Gala Alex is the one Gala adventurer I'm missing. I was so concerned and so worried based on the story that this would be Gala Cerise, and it turns out that some of you in the comments who said it might be Alex were totally correct. It is Alex, and it was a very astute observation that I saw made was there were some shadow ruins getting double drops, suggesting that this banner was likely to have something of the shadow element. So really good call on that. It is Gala Alex. I don't have her. All the more reason for me to summon as somebody who likes limited units and wants to try round out my Gala collection. So for me personally, this is like a dream showcase. I'm super pumped about it. But for others out there who are trying to weigh their options, I will say I fully expect by the time we get closer to Halloween, I fully expect that there's going to be another limited showcase. I don't think these are the only Halloween units we're seeing this year. So I want to mentally prepare all of you for that. I want that to be a consideration and a possibility in your mind. And it's also possible that they bring out the other Halloween units on a Gala banner at the end of this month, because this is the first time ever that they've broken with tradition and now they're willing to put limited time adventurers on a Gala banner. And remember, these Gala banners are great. They're high value. When you want to summon, it's a good expected return in the sense that you're getting a lot of 5 stars because it starts off with a 6% appearance rate for 5 stars, but they're not easier to snipe or target specific adventurers and dragons on. It's actually a little harder than a normal summon showcase. So putting limited characters on them makes a lot of sense monetarily from a Cygames standpoint, and at the same time, it doesn't necessarily feel too bad as a player psychologically because you're still summoning on something where you're getting a lot of 5 stars. The reason it takes longer to target them or pull them is because you're going to get pity broken a lot more along the way because of the higher overall rate for 5-star adventurers and dragons. So yeah, I could totally see at the end of the month we get another Halloween Gala of some type with limited time adventurers. Be prepared for that, have that in your mind, and I will say, what I fully expect after this, we're going to know if you wait till the end of the banner to summon, you'll know for sure. I fully expect after this to get some type of filler banner that will basically serve as a break between the end of this and our next higher value showcase such as a Gala. And they tend to put these filler banners in between. I'm convinced at this point that one of the reasons is if they put a high value banner right afterward, you have more info to make a better decision. Whereas if they stagger it, you don't really fully know what's going to come up next, so you might want to summon on this one, and then by the time the next one comes around, you might want to spend money, since you already summoned a lot on one of these. But yeah, that's the kind of consideration you might want to have with this. It's limited season in full force now. And not only that, but imagine if, unlike me, you are missing any of these past Halloween adventures or dragons. That adds a whole nother layer to this, because these not being featured makes them very hard to pull. Even a 4-star, if you want to get one of these 4-stars like Halloween Lowen, one of the best adventures in the game, it's not really a sure thing. You have to do hundreds of summons, I think, to even have like a 50-50 shot of getting a Halloween Lowen. So it's tough to actually pull these and snipe these off this showcase. They are present, and it's great if you manage to get them, especially if you didn't have them beforehand, but I don't know that you can put all of your eggs into the basket of getting past Halloween adventures or dragons off of this. And with that being said, I guess my overall take on this showcase is you should do your free summons, and if you don't have Gala Alex, I think it's probably worth continuing to summon and try pull her. You may end up worm sigiling on this. As a backup option, I would say you want to look toward Halloween Akasha. To me, in general, she looks a lot stronger than Halloween Melsa. Halloween Melsa, while super adorable, seems to be sort of the weakest link on this showcase if I had to pick one. And with that out of the way, let's talk about these adventurers themselves. So we'll begin with Halloween Melsa. We'll have so much fun this Halloween, we'll wake the dead. Love her look. Love that Cerise makes an appearance, a cameo there. Cerise looking a little bit basic, doesn't actually look like a fully fledged alt for her, so I'm not really expecting one this Halloween. I'm still on the train of maybe a Curran, Heinwald, Akasha, Lathna type event, and among those, Lathna and Heinwald would be the ones who haven't gotten an alt yet, so I hope they get alts by the end of the month. But as for Halloween Melsa, she is a Wind Lance, pretty interesting combination. Her details say that she's a Sylvan girl who dressed up as the living dead for Halloween. It would be hard to tell how gentle she usually is in this outfit, save for how she is unable to hide her excitement about the upcoming festivities. So cute, so precious. And yeah, she's not the scariest zombie. Unfortunately, she's not the strongest zombie either. As for her skill, she has Spooky Revival, which increases the entire team's strength by 25% for 15 seconds. I have the wiki pulled up here to the side that I'm able to look at, so to fill you in, this has an SP cost of 4,770 according to the wiki. That is not on the lower side. That's actually a pretty high cost for this effect. So I don't consider that to be especially good. You may be able to reach favorable breakpoints by using a skill haste dragon such as Ariel or Freya on her. But what you're seeing out of this is that she is most likely to be a pure support character, with her first skill just being a pure buff. And Wind has a lot of those, and a lot of them, despite how good they are, ended up not really playing much of a role, especially in the master difficulty of Ciella's Wrath. Sure, they have been useful in things like High Mercury in the past, in the expert difficulty of Ciella. We saw Tobias be popular. Back in High Mercury, we saw Noelle as a popular character, and Dragonule Zane still holds down the fort as a good backliner, even though he's never really been the best of the Wind buff bots. But with that type of competition, it's hard for me to imagine Melsa really breaking through. And now that we have version 2.0, Templar Hope is an insane buff bot in the Wind element. Not only does he give defense off his first skill as of version 2.0, he also gives strength, and he gives so much tankiness, so much survival to your team that he is just the de facto preferred unit, in my opinion, for Master Ciella co-op. He's a staple in the auto battle clears of that, as well as the auto battle clears of the Expert Ciella trial. So I don't really see Melsa having a clear path to seeing use here based on her first skill. Now her second skill, Venom Bite, is a little bit more interesting. It's shareable at a cost of 6 shared skill points. It deals wind damage to enemies directly ahead, inflicts poison, and lowers their poison resistance by 10% for 30 seconds. The resistance reduction will not stack, but changing direction is possible during this attack. That last part about poison resistance reduction probably the most interesting thing about Spooky Melsa here, because the damage on this skill, according to the wiki, is not very strong. It looks like this has an SP cost of 6,800 and deals 3 hits of 140% wind damage, and then that's not counting the poison damage, which is about 60% per tick, and you get 5 ticks total in a span of 15 seconds. Yeah, that's just really low as far as damage. In version 2.0, we're seeing damage modifiers of like 2,000%, 2,500% even, and nobody really bats an eye at that. You have things that are doing like 4,000% damage, like Gala Ellie's second skill. So when you see 3 times 140% damage, that's really low. That's like very unfortunately low for her. I mean, it's less than 500% damage total before you count poison, and sure, poison's great, but I think the poison resistance reduction is the most interesting thing here. You could share this onto characters who tend to struggle with capping out poison. What I'm imagining personally as an Eleonora main is that she caps out poison extremely fast, probably in less than 180 seconds, probably more like 120 seconds you cap out poison, maybe 180 if I'm generous. But against Ciela, if there are any other poison enablers, you're going to hit the cap on poison very fast, and she's not exactly a high DPS without that poison access. So for a character like her, I could see this actually being kind of nice, but in the grand scheme of things, I don't know if this would be even better than just like running a Frostbite skill on her and letting her use Frostbite punish her, let's say. So yeah, it's a little bit hard for me to evaluate with the damage being so low, and I should also say the shared SP cost looks very high. I'm reading off here that it's 14,280 SP when you share this. I just don't know if it'd even be worth it to actually unlock and use, even on a character who caps poison as quickly as Eleonora. So all in all, unfortunately for Spooky Melsa, Halloween Melsa, I feel like she's just too adorable to actually pack too much of a punch with her skills. But her abilities really don't save it here either. She's got HP as a co-ability, it's fine, it's valued in these auto comps, it's standard on lances. Her chain co-ability, one of the more basic ones, but it is one of the more reliable ways to get a small amount of strength. Usually this isn't considered like a coveted chain co-ability, but it's a nice to have. You see this on characters like Patya has a similar one in the shadow element, and it's usually on characters who are already pretty good on their own, so it's a reasonable upside to have on like a lance. But her regular abilities, this first one's so disappointing to me because I had so much hype around it, but it's called Endurance of the Dead. Upon revival, the user will come back with 80% of their HP once per quest. Unfortunately, it doesn't give you any extra revives. It literally means the revive mechanic in the game, which you only get access to if you wipe in solo play or if your character dies in co-op, and only on quests that actually have revives built into them. Not all quests actually have that. So you already revive with what looks to me like 30% HP at least, because you're in the green territory of your HP bar. I'm not an expert on how much HP you revive with, but suffice to say the difference between that and 80% is not worth an ability slot in my opinion. You ideally don't want to be dying on quests to begin with, so to have an ability like this where the only upside is when you fail, like you can literally reset a quest in solo play, right? If you died, you could just start the quest over so that you get the best possible rewards, including the survival bonus. So unfortunately, if this was actually where she got like a free revive every quest, this would be amazing. This would be very interesting, right? This would let you build around and plan around it. But as it is, just giving you more HP on a revive that you probably don't even want to use, it didn't really pan out how I had hoped. Her other abilities, Freeze Res 100% and Poison equals Team Strength plus 10%. Freeze Res is fine. I think I would have liked to see her with Bog Res because Silas is so useful and so dominant as a Freeze Res Wind Lance. Also a good Poison enabler, a good buffer, a good strength debuffer, so he kind of has the market cornered for a Freeze Res Wind Lance that kind of works like this. Her Poison equals Team Strength plus 10% is fine. One thing that's sort of nice about it is it's a 10-second buff whenever you poison an enemy, and it doesn't activate again for 5 seconds, but if you can cause poison again before then, you could technically stack this with itself. So I suppose that's kind of nice, but if you actually look at Halloween Melsa, like, personally, the only way that she can cause poison is on her second skill, or a shared skill. So it's not actually that likely to come up where you'd be able to stack this realistically. So you're mostly looking at like a 10% buff to your team that lasts 10 seconds. Yeah, Halloween Melsa, I'm sorry, didn't really come together so well, but she is the most adorable and precious zombie ever. That's the reason I will be trying to summon for her, perhaps in addition to being curious about testing out Venom Bites on Eleonora, but realistically, as I mentioned, I don't really see this going anywhere. So yeah, Halloween Melsa seems to be more of a pure, like, collectible character. I really see very few applications for her. I'm sure you could probably slot her in and you'd be fine as just a generic Lance in some of these auto comps, but I can't see her being especially good or better than, let's say, Silas. Maybe she's cheaper to build because you don't need to mana spiral her, but I do see pretty significant drawbacks to her compared to him. Now let's talk about Akasha, because I think Akasha is where the banner starts to turn around a little bit. So Halloween Akasha says she invites us to an eventide full of naughty tricks and sweet madness. And I wasn't expecting her to be a water blade, but I love how they implemented her vampirism into her kit. We'll talk about that shortly. A priestess from the Church of All, now dressed as a vampire, she seems almost childlike as she cavorts about town, but sometimes shows a smile as bewitching as the full moon. Is her heart empty, or is there something there? So her skills are Nameless Abductor and Coffin of Madness, Nameless Abductor being shareable with a cost of 6, that deals water damage to enemies in a line and reduces their defense by 3% for 10 seconds. And this has a significant damage modifier to it. It's actually 2000% damage, which is very respectable. And it has a fairly low SP cost. So from what I'm seeing here, the SP cost on this is 2640 or 7656 when shared, according to the wiki. That is very reasonable for 2000% water damage and guaranteed defense reduction of 3% for 10 seconds. Seems really solid, and one thing you may have noticed in 2.0 in the patch notes they made for a lot of characters defense debuffs were retconned so that they are guaranteed, but they don't stack. This can stack. That is something that separates it significantly from other defense debuffs, and I think it really fits into her playstyle quite nicely, as we'll discuss in a second when we get to her abilities. But as for her second skill, Coffin of Madness, this is the first appearance of Bleed in the water element, from what I can tell. We first got Bleed in Shadow and Wind when Addis, Ieyasu, Wotan, and Sazanka released for the game's first New Year's event. Eventually, Bleed started to spill over into other elements. We got more in the Wind element in the form of Victor. We got Bleed in the Flame element in the form of Mega Man. With the 2.0 changes, they also went back and added Bleed on some other characters, like I think Taro has Bleed now when he never did before. But I don't think we had Bleed in the water element yet. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but yeah, if I'm right, that would be its first appearance here. And this skill, again, does a good amount of damage. This one has an SP cost of 5280. It deals 5 hits of 500% water damage, I should say, which is 2500% damage total. Again, a solid, respectable 2.0 modifier, and causes bleeding for 30 seconds, which the bleed damage does 110% damage every 5 seconds or so, 4.9 seconds. So you get 6 ticks of bleed in there. So your total damage on this, when you count the bleed, is going to be higher. And remember, bleed does more damage the more stacks of it you have on an enemy, capping off, I think, at 1.5 times the amount of normal damage when you have 3 stacks of it active. I don't remember the exact multiplier on it, but suffice to say, when you have full stacks of bleed, that is the best case scenario for a bleed unit. But here's the catch to Halloween Akasha. Her bleed chance, the chance that she actually causes bleed on an enemy, is only 50%. That is surprisingly and seemingly intentionally lower than normal. Now, the standard for bleed chance prior to 2.0 and prior to some mana spirals was 80%. If you looked at Ieyasu, Addis, Suzanka, even Victor, like all of them have an 80% chance to cause bleed. When you mana spiraled a character, even before 2.0, that would go up to 100%, so it would be guaranteed. And so it's weird to me, I haven't checked like Taro, for example, maybe he's lower, but it is kind of weird to me that they gave her 50%, but it's kind of to justify one of her abilities, this one. And yeah, it's still quite strong, I think. One thing to note about bleed is it's not technically an affliction. It is considered a debuff, so it's not something that would disable any of the twins' buffs that they have on themselves, like afflictions do, so that is a consideration to it. But because it's a debuff, you also can't build up a tolerance in enemies to it. With regular afflictions, the more you do them on an enemy, they'll slowly build up a tolerance over time to where they can no longer be afflicted by that same affliction. That is what I was getting at when I talked about how Eleanor caps poison quickly when we were discussing Halloween Melsa and what her second skill does. But with bleed, the only restriction is you can only have up to 3 stacks on the target at a time, but that doesn't affect you from bleeding that target in the future just because they got up to 3 at one point during the quest. So yeah, Akasha seems to be all about the debuffs. I could see the debuff time worm print we just got as part of Mordecai's event, Forgotten Truths, maybe being relevant on her in the 4-star print slot. For her co-ability and chain co-ability, they're kind of standard, but she is a water blade, and that first co-ability, the strength one obviously, is good. That's what you see normally on Blade, so neither of these Halloween units really have anything special in the co-ability or chain co-ability department. But as for Halloween Akasha's regular abilities, her first one is Defense Reduced equals Debuff Edge 2. It increases the chance of inflicting debuffs by 50% for 5 seconds upon successfully reducing an enemy's defense. After activating, this ability will not activate again for 5 seconds. Alright, so there you have it. That is basically the combo. So you debuff the enemy's defense with the first skill, and then you have a 100% chance of causing bleed with the second skill. And you can use them in tandem in that way. It doesn't seem like this would actually increase your chance on the first skill. That appears to me to be guaranteed. So it really would only apply to the second skill and any shared skills that she has. Most debuffs as of 2.0 are guaranteed, but there are some that are not. Silas is the one that comes to mind as a debuff that's not guaranteed, that has a pretty interesting utility effect. So for Silas, his debuff is only a 50% chance, but on his Woodland Spear, once he's been mana spiraled, you can get a 30% strength reduction on the enemy and also poison them with that skill. But it's only a 50% chance to activate that. So using Akasha's first ability, she could get that 30% strength reduction on the enemy as well as poison, basically guaranteed, at least for the strength reduction, as long as she had used her first skill beforehand and debuffed the enemy's defense. I could actually see that being kind of relevant. Silas' shared skill's got a pretty cheap SP cost, you can use it a good amount of times in a match. The twins, I don't think poison's particularly good against them. I'm not sure, I'm trying to remember if in one of their modes they can be poisoned, but I do think they can be in one of their modes at least, so that you could potentially dispel some of their buffs. But I don't think it's a predominant strategy against them, let's say that. As for the rest of Halloween Akasha's ability, she's got stun res of 100%. Okay, I tend to prefer to see burn. Stun is, well, actually in 2.0 it's kind of okay to have either one, because you can get burn res with an affinity bonus, and the affinity bonus that gives burn res has 2 very reasonable prints in it. One of them is Resilient Offense. At the 5-star slot, it gives you Resilient Offense anyway. I think it's called the Synthetic Dragon, and at the 4-star or below slot, I think there's a print like Bridal Bouquet or Valentine's Bouquet. It's definitely got some flowers on it, and it's got the affinity that prevents burning, and it gives you like 20 to 25% skill prep, a small amount of skill prep, which are both, I mean, they're both okay if you want to have complete burn immunity. It's not a bad way to go about it. But actually, I think the stun res prints that you use are a little bit less relevant to get stun res on a water element character who doesn't have it. I think you have to put on Affliction Guard and then like Beach Battle or something. Which Beach Battle is okay, but the Affliction Guard, when you're already bringing a burn res character to 100% stun res, there's not really that many more afflictions that are going to happen to them in water content, flame enemy content. Yeah, that's a little bit of a tangent, but really for twins, I think what we've seen is if you're player controlled, you're not necessarily autoing, then there's not too much risk either way, whether you want to go burn res or stun res, at least up to the expert difficulty, master being still sort of a mystery since that's not out yet. And finally, she has bleeding equals HP recovery too, which I love how they've implemented this because it definitely makes me feel like they got across the idea of her being a vampire between the bleeding and now the HP recovery. So it's kind of like life drain effectively. I first read this and thought it would be cool if they did this to where whenever the enemy takes a bleed tick, you get some life back. It doesn't quite work that way. It basically just gives you a one-use heal when you cause bleeding, at the beginning of causing bleeding, and then it won't activate again for 5 seconds, but then the next time you cause bleeding, you get that same burst heal. It looks like from the wiki, it's a 45% recovery potency heal, which is pretty reasonable. It's like a third of what you heal off a healer's first skill, at least pre 2.0 is what I'm thinking of with that. Those used to be like 108 to 120, 130, somewhere in that range. So 45% is fine. It's like a medium size heal. And the fact that you can recur this is going to give her a nice amount of survival to her. Like every time you use her second skill, if you're getting that bleed off, you're going to get a nice heal to Akasha. So I really like what I'm seeing with her. She doesn't necessarily cause afflictions, but a lot of water characters have access to Frostbite now. Less of them have Freeze and Bog, but it is still pretty widely available. So I could totally see her being quite popular and used to good effect, and we don't know yet what the master difficulty of the twins Agito is going to look like, but she is a character I would not at all be surprised to see show up there. So yeah, I would have to rate her a little bit higher than Melsa. I don't necessarily think she's going to be a super powerhouse. Like I could easily see that it still ends up being like 4 Karinas, 2 Karinas, and 2 Mitsuba for this faster runs. But as far as a self-sustaining character with good DPS, I feel like she'll be right up there. Alright, and that brings us to the end of the showcase. What is returning? We have Gala Alex and Gala Cat Sith. I'm not going to spend as much time on them since they are returning here. Gala Alex is a fantastic adventurer, really good in the player's hands, less good as AI, but still can kind of brute force her way to relative success compared to many other adventurers. I wouldn't say she's bad necessarily as AI just because of how powerful of an adventurer she is inherently. With Gala Alex, there's a lot of text to read through here, but my understanding of her, me not having her of course, is that she's actually kind of straightforward to play. You tend to use her C5 combo from what I understand. You try to fill up your skill reservoir, and you can alternate between these skills, and then basically you just kill the enemy at burst, or at break rather, with burst damage. But I really don't know her playstyle too well, so I can't comment too much further than that. As for applications, she has a good co-ability, chain co-ability combination. It's probably the best way to get this particular chain co-ability. This is also on Heinwald, but with him you only get recovery potency and not dragon haste. She has dual resistances, poison punisher, reduced defense punisher. Like, she is a very explosive adventurer. And in 2.0, she's no longer the absolute juggernaut that she once was as far as completely outclassing other shadow DPS characters. But nevertheless, when you compare her to, say, Yaten, who's gotten a lot better in 2.0, she has the utility. I think that's the one-up that she has on Yaten. She has reliable and, to a degree, spammable Dispel. It's not spammable on the same level as Belina, it's not spammable on the same level as Grace, but when you're talking about characters with reliable Dispel, this is in the conversation in the shadow element for sure, and Gala Alex's presence is often good enough in Master Kaiyan, if not preferred nowadays for faster runs. Like with the 5 Wormprint slots, it's easier to fit in Poison Punisher than it used to be, so you can run a Belina, Patya, Gala, Alex, Grace comp. You can forego the Grace for a pure DPS comp and run a couple Gala Alexes. Just make sure you're hitting the right timings as far as your DPS and when you break. And yeah, she seems very good to me from what I've seen, but I've never had her, never really felt I needed her either. So I don't know that she's a must-have. In my experience, she's not really a must-have. She hasn't prevented me from autoing anything. I know what I've heard anecdotally, she's not like the queen of autos. She's not like Grace in that respect, or even really that good because of her more complicated mechanics. The AI can't fully utilize them. But still, she just does a lot of damage, so she's sort of okay, and she has dual res, so she's sort of okay. But yeah, Gala Alex is a good pickup. I would say this is a reason to consider summoning here if you don't have her. And then finally, Gala Cat Sith, another very strong Gala returnee. Gala Cat Sith, probably not on the level of Gala Mars and Gala Thor, maybe a little bit below. Certainly very explosive. You get a lot of skill damage off of her. If the user is attuned to Shadow, increases the damage dealt by the user's next 15 skills by 180%. So it only lasts for 15 skills, but you can recharge the paw counter on this by doing 25 hit combos, and you can store a maximum of 15 of these type of buffs. And then when you leave your shapeshift, you also get 8 of those paw counters back. And I think I don't know if it's mentioned on here, her auto attacks cause sleep? Let me see if this is mentioned on here. I swear I've seen her put people to sleep, and I don't see it anywhere on here, which is crazy to me. I swear I've seen her put people to sleep. Okay, I don't know what's going on, but I'm like 99% that if she just attacks enemies, they fall asleep sometimes, or you'll see them resist sleep. I'm like 99%. I don't know why that's not written here. I'm rereading it again. Yeah, I have no idea. That's so weird. Man, that is what I was hoping for Melsa. Like, I was hoping that they just didn't write that on her first ability. Like, by the way, secret free revive for Melsa. It's not written, but you get it for free. Just like on Cat Sith, apparently you just get free sleep. What? This is so weird. Huh. Well, I'm confident that Gala Cat Sith can put people to sleep. I always thought it was on her skill, but it doesn't say that, so I think it's on her auto attacks. And that seems to be reflective of what I've noticed as far as like the resist text that you see in a quest. Anyway, she's a good pickup, strong dragon, not as good in master difficulty of Kaiyan because the fights tend to last longer, but if you are trying to force a shorter fight, she is still quite good there. In the 4 DPS comp, she's going to be your preferred dragon to use there so that you can break relatively quickly before any unavoidable damage. And yeah, I feel good having her in my collection as a Gala dragon. Even though Shadow's pretty deep as far as dragons go, a lot of the best dragons may not be as easily accessible to you. They haven't had a dragon special in a while or been around in a while, and a lot of times they're good on specific characters. So like Andromeda, for example, you really want to use her on a low HP character, whereas Azazel you really want to use on either Grace or a buff bot. And so I think Gala Cat Sith kind of fulfills a nice role for the mini Shadow characters who rely upon skill damage. And sure, if you have Shinobi and you're going for a longer fight, that is a fine way to go, but for shorter fights or for characters who can maintain a combo and continuously build up the paw counters on this, I think that Gala Cat Sith is still excellent in these fast clears of high dragons that you can do nowadays in co-op. The fast clears of Expert Kaiyan, I'm sure you can do. This is a nice dragon to have access to. So that's pretty much my take on this Gala Dragalia remix. I personally am very excited to summon on. I'm going to do my free summons before I come back to it and try clean the banner. It's interesting. I mean, the Gala returnees are strong. I think Halloween Akasha looks strong. Halloween Melsa, unfortunately, just looks so adorable, but just kind of abysmal as far as a character. And the fact that these other Halloween units are present, if you're going all the way, like, decent chance if you do 300 summons you get a Halloween Lowen. Not guaranteed, but decent along the way. So I do think that's a worthy consideration if you're planning on trying to spark on this banner and you're interested in everything here, whether it's from a gameplay standpoint or as a collector. Like, you could pick up some of these Halloween things. They're not on a rate up. It's not super likely you'll pick them up. But on the Worm Sigil trade, Halloween Mim is present, Halloween Elisand is present, and Halloween Meridimus is present, in addition to Gala Cat Sith, Gala Alex, Halloween Melsa, and Halloween Akasha. So you have a nice selection if you end up getting that far. Unfortunately, this banner lasts just a few days, so you're going to have to make your summoning decision soon. I wish you luck in whatever you happen to pull, but that is going to do it for today, everyone. So thank you as always for watching, take care, and I'll see you next time.